Welcome back in Sick'em 365 Radio. Paul, Catalina, Craig Smoak, Armstrong, Jack, Hayden are here. Our buddy Lance Aldridge is here in studio. Great to see him. And we're joined now by Drew Davison from the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. Drew, you've had an interesting week. I mean, I think the writing is was starting to get on the wall for Gary Patterson, maybe a change just based on everything's gone the last few years, but it got accelerated over the last couple of weeks. Were you shocked at how fast that happened?
Oh, absolutely, Paul. I mean, when Texas Tech fired Matt Wells, I guess, 10 days ago, 2 weeks ago, that's when I, got the first kind of hint that, hey, TCU might be willing to part ways with Gary. Emphasis on might. I certainly never thought it would be during the season. I thought it would come after the season. So, yeah, certainly, it was interesting how quickly it happened. But, I think it probably, started, with the Oklahoma game. You just, obviously they got off to a slow start losing to SMU and Texas. And then, Oklahoma, smoked them pretty good. And you could just tell the gap between the top of the league, OU, and TCU had grown pretty significant. And then just a couple disappointing games against West Virginia and last week at K-State. But again, I never thought Gary Patterson would have a mid-season departure.
So Jeremiah Donati was speaking just a little while ago, I believe, Drew, and commenting on the search that will now get underway, and he also denied one of the rumors, I guess, that was surrounding kind of how everything unfolded. What was his kind of perspective on the offer they apparently made for him to finish out the season, him turning that down, and that whole part of the story? Where was Donati on how that unfolded?
Yeah, well, so the thing he really wanted to clarify was there was no ultimatum for Gary Patterson. Once the decision had been made, it wasn't like they went to Gary and said, hey, if you fire this coach or if you do this, X, Y, Z, you'll be back. The decision had kind of been made that, hey, it's time to move on. And as painful and tough as it is, we've had a great run, but time, to kind of bring in someone else to run the program. And, they obviously hoped that Gary would stick around and, kind of have a farewell send-off, so to speak. But, as you all know, just, being in the Big 12 and whatnot, Gary Patterson's not the most sentimental guy. I thought that, that plan probably had low probability of success of convincing Gary to stick around as a lame duck coach, and ultimately, he decided to move on. Which, once someone doesn't want you, I understand his thought process there.
Yeah, I could not foresee him waxing on about what a great last 4 weeks this has been to be with the guy. It's just not his style at all. I couldn't have seen that. Drew, how much of the I don't want to say, there's kind of maybe added antics from Gary this year. There's always been something where he, goes off on a tangent about this or that, or he kind of gets one thing in his sights, and that's kind of a repeated theme. But this year it was just kind of everything. Every time there was something, there was kind of something. How much of that was Gary feeling the pressure for the first time in a long time at TCU?
Yeah, I think so. And some of the rants that, were just head scratching, going after the TCU alum who, had less than 100 followers on his website, and things like that, and the SMU, just kind of really ripping them for the flag planting and whatnot. I mean, when you're winning 10, 11 games, I think, those are obviously met more with an eye roll or whatnot. But, I think some of those, as I was talking to someone, they kind of mentioned those are just added unnecessary data points that Gary kind of just kept putting on. The West Virginia loss is another data point, but some of those rants during the press conferences were just other things that just kind of added to the list. But at the end of the day, I mean, it came down to wins and losses, and since 2018, TCU's the game under 500, and they just felt it was time to find a new voice, so to speak.
So, Drew, where are we with Zach Evans? I know there's been various reports about whether his locker was cleaned out at one point, and obviously there's a lot of curiosity from outsiders when they saw he wasn't playing last Saturday, although that was due to injury. But, obviously he's going to be a name that people start to debate about, and I'm sure there will be others. Can you get any kind of a sense yet on sort of where the TCU players are mindset-wise with the changeover to now Jerry Kill?
Yeah, I mean, they say Jerry Kill is or Jerry Kill, has, from what he talked today, has good buy-in and whatnot. But I think, Jeremiah Donati acknowledged it, and Jerry Kill kind of did too. They're trying to play for the players. It's kind of like, hey, let's rally and win one for Coach T and whatnot. But the reality is, with any coaching change, recruits are probably going to reopen the recruitments, and players are probably going to, explore the, what's out there in the transfer portal and whatnot. And so, yeah, I mean, I think obviously all the stars, Max Duggan, Zach Evans, Quentin Johnston, you name it, all those guys, I'm sure, are kind of intrigued to see where this coaching search goes. And it wouldn't be a surprise if any of them hit the portal.
Drew, I know that did he leave a game plan? Is that maybe a fair way to put it for his coaches, or discuss it? You wrote about that today, that there's not many schools that get his goat like Baylor does, and that he enjoys beating, especially maybe when they're a little bit higher ranked than his team is and ruining their season. Did he? What was it? Did he leave him a game plan and kind of go over it? What was that happened this week with Gary before he left and turned things over to Jerry Kill?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things. There's kind of multiple layers to it, right, Paul? I mean, number one, I think it kind of shuts down the narrative that he quote unquote quit on the team with 4 games left. I mean, he still cares about his guys. He wants them to have success. The reason he walked away was the administration didn't want him after the season, right? It wasn't about the team or his assistants by any stretch. So, it kind of sent that message in my mind, and it also, his fingerprints are still all over this program and this team, and he wants his guys to be successful, and he doesn't want Baylor to go, win 65-14 or whatever. He's hoping, that they're competitive, and it's a reflection on, kind of the guy, his staff, and the players he brought in. So, he had kind of already started on the game plan against Baylor and met with some of his assistants to kind of go over, what he was going to implement and think and install for this week. So, but I also think it just, he's a ball coach, and that's what ball coaches do, right?
Yeah, it is. Drew, I saw where Donati also mentioned, they've hired a search firm now, and even made the comment in regards to the next head coach of potentially leaning offensively minded because of the fact that they've been defensively minded for so long, which makes some sense. I mean, that's kind of what Baylor did as well, going from the Browse era to the Rule and now Aranda eras of defense. But obviously Sonny Dykes and names like that are out there, but focusing in and looking at this search, I mean, who are the names that stick out to you, and maybe some that nobody's even talking about just yet?
Yeah, I'm actually kind of working on a story now. Kind of the 3 main takeaways that you hit, or the 3 bullet points TCU is kind of looking for is, one, a current head coach. I mean, they feel – so I would think that the Joey McGuires and don't blank on Mike Elko at A&M. I think the coordinator's assistants, are probably not their top targets. They're looking at current head coaches like a Sonny Dykes or Louisiana's Billy Napier, or maybe they engage with Jeff Traylor down at UTSA, even though he just signed a big deal. So a current head coach, like you said, offensive minded, just because it's so tough to follow in Gary Patterson's defensive footsteps. And then thirdly, I think TCU is a pretty attractive job. especially given its location and how much resources they're willing to put into the coaching staff.
How much of the NIL transfer portal thing was? I mean, I know that the TCU got some transfers. That certainly. I mean, Chandler Morris is a transfer, But how much of that was also that, Gary Patterson's 61, he's a very old school coach when it comes to those things, and that was something that was going to take him a little more time to completely wrap his arms around, not only just functionally, but accepting it as a reality in college football.
Yeah, I think it's just a kind of a combination of things. That most importantly with Gary, he contrary to some popular belief, and I know he went on some rants, but he had kind of evolved and come around on the transfer portal. They brought in a couple kids from Memphis, Eze, their left tackle, and a safety named TJ Carter, to try and fill some gaps on this year's team. Obviously, has worked out to varying degrees of success and things like that. But, yeah, I think kind of the way the football is going, you do need someone, now, Gary, may be successful if he coaches again. That'd certainly be probably the betting favorite for him to find some success. But, yeah, I think they kind of wanted someone who really embraced the NIL era, who embraced the transfer portal and whatnot in terms of, hey, this is where college football is heading. And it's very hard for, the developmental coaches like Gary Patterson are probably going to face a tougher time just because schools can come and poach the guys you've spent 2-3 years developing.
Drew, no, you got to run, but a final thing for you. There's an actual game this weekend in Fort Worth. Baylor and –
Is there?
Yes, imagine that. Baylor and TCU. I mean, we know the deal here. Baylor is going to be favored, and they should be. Jared Kill is interim. I mean – what are you expecting from the fans? I know it's kind of hit or miss as far as attendance goes anyways, but, especially in light of the news this week. And what are you expecting TCU to maybe show or do as far as this weekend goes?
Well, I certainly wouldn't be surprised if there's a lot of green in the stadium. But no, I think, TCU fans, the diehards, the real avid fans are still going to come and support the team and hope the Frogs pull an upset. And, Jerry Kill and Jeremiah Zanati all said the right things about the guys staying bought in and whatnot. But I think, that's obviously easier said than done. And when you face a team like Baylor, who still has the shot to win a Big 12 championship and whatnot, they're obviously probably going to be a little bit more motivated. But with that being said, TCU's got guys who hope playing on Sundays, and film is film, and this is another opportunity to put some film out there in a positive way. So I think the effort should be there, so to speak, but we'll see kind of how it all goes. Max Duggan is very questionable to start at quarterback, so it looks like it could be Chandler Morris, but Jerry Kill said today and tomorrow will kind of dictate that in seeing how much Max can do.
Drew Davison, Fort Worth Star Telegram. Drew, thanks for hopping on with us. Enjoy that daycare pickup you got coming up here in a second.
All right. Can't beat it. Thanks, guys.
All right, buddy. Yeah, I asked him for 5 o'clock. He's like, yeah, I've got a daycare pickup, man. I can't do it.
You got to do what you got to do. I mean, no, it's interesting, and he's right. The Max Duggan things, that's big. If Chandler Morris does have to start, but very curious about Zach Evans and what he does, but they do have Kendry Miller, who's still a very good back. So either you're going to see both of them or they're going to see Miller. Either way, they still got to prepare for a good running back. And Quentin Johnston's a heck of a receiver, man. He really is, just from down the road, and a guy that Baylor probably wishes they had, although their receivers are pretty good. But, I mean, he's 30 minutes away from you know, and they tried. He picked TCU, but he's very good. And, you look at what Xavier Worthy did last week, and Johnston's not the exact same type of receiver, but he can hit you and hurt you deep and make some big catches. So, yeah, it'll be a challenge. I mean, I think you got to deal with the wild card of a team that's, basically been backed into a corner and is a little bit desperate and hungry right now as a result of all this, commotion in their world. So that's either going to turn into, getting blown out in like historic fashion, which we've seen when a team is kind of at their wits' end before. We've seen that here before. Or are they going to be, a team that's rabid and ready to go and ready to fight? I would be getting ready for a fight if I were Baylor, just in case, because they do have players that can make you hurt, and I'm sure Jerry Keel's not going to just waltz into that chair and, think anything less than we better put on one hell of a performance this weekend. So Baylor needs to gear up for sure.
Absolutely do. When we come back, Baylor Director of Athletics Mac Rhodes. This is Sikkim 365 Radio.